Warning, this is not a podcast for those who have got it together. We are men seeking answers to the questions that have plagued our mind. Can we be undefeated?
All right. First of all, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Sure.
And for being on the board. I think that's pretty awesome. If people listening don't know, we launched a not-for-profit. It's called Even One Less. You can go to the website. It's still a working in progress, but I think we're going to have an event, Christy, in like the second week in September. I'm going to send it out to everybody that's involved, and really just kind of like a meet and greet. And we're actually going to have it, I think, here in Elk City.
Okay.
To kind of introduce the not-for-profit and I'm going to start by trying to get like Elk City in this area involved. Some statistics came out yesterday, or I don't know about yesterday, but it came out through the state of Oklahoma. Just really about suicide, and it was real. And Beckham County was rated one of the highest counties, in Oklahoma. It's really pretty crazy, and people were sending it to me, and I was just kind of blown away by the statistics of it. So I think that, like, originally we had talked about having an event actually in Midland, but I think that after seeing those statistics, that it really put it on my mind that us having an event, really in I say my backyard here is a great place to start. Plus, I think that I know a lot more people, and I think I can get a lot more people involved in this area than maybe if I started in Midland, and then later have an event in Midland too. How do you like living in Midland?
Well, I have a lot of friends that I've made. I've been here since September, so I have a running group. There's a lot of things that I like. I miss my kids. My son's there in Elk City, and his wife and my grandson. And so I miss that. And then my girls, one's in Oklahoma City, and then my youngest is in Stillwater in college. So
yeah,
I miss just being closer to them. But I'm meeting Destry, my oldest daughter. I'm meeting her tonight. They're going to drive down and meet me in Fredericksburg, and we're just going to have a weekend. So
I always talk about Midland because, my family's from there, as I've told you. And as long as I can remember, from a little kid, I went to Midland, Midland, Texas. And Midland is there's an old Jeff Bridges movies. We always talk about that, where he calls it the armpit of Texas. And it is definitely, if you've never been to Midland, Texas, it's like, if there's parts of Midland that's like a third world country. I mean, my aunt lives out in the country and, has a decent house but man, people have moved in right beside her, with trailer parks and our trailers and RVs. And it's just unbelievable. Even out in the country, it's like, it's just a different place. Yeah,
well, I think growing up around Elk City, it's really just a bigger Elk City as far as the oil field aspect. You can obviously tell it's boom or bust. The mentality is still there, boom or bust. Like I think about, when we run, especially, or just driving in town, you can tell the infrastructure has just been so behind the growth. And it's really, I don't know. The one thing that I learned about Elk City when I was on the Elk City leadership is we had some great forward thinkers. I feel like that established some really important things like the water, not having to ration water because of the water wells or water rights that they purchased, all that. And I've really learned to appreciate that. Yeah. And it helps me notice other things. Like, it's not a bad place. It's full of great people here. It's just some things still have some catching up to do.
Yeah. And it's kind of crazy that that's the case, honestly, but
there's tons of money here.
Yeah, there's a big disparity between, and I always quote this statistic, but I don't know if it's still true, but it was true, which is Midland has more millionaires than anywhere in the United States. And if not, it's close, and because you realize that you have, obviously extreme wealth, but then you have the extreme poverty on the other side, and you can drive around and see that extreme poverty too. And so there's this huge, gap between, basically wealth and poverty. And it's really kind of staggering. I don't know that there's any place else in the United States that you can really just see it kind of in your face like you can in Midland. And, you would think that Midland would run out of oil. I mean, you would think that, just by, but that's not true. It's not really oil. So,
no.
Yeah.
No,
well,
in fact,
what?
I work with early career engineers for ConocoPhillips, and that's one of our big pushes is that even though you're just starting your career, you can probably live out the rest of your career, even if you didn't want to leave Midland. So there's a good projected future. I mean, it's, of course, dependent on prices, but just like you said, it's not going to run out in the near future. And then there's also innovation and things that, especially the larger companies are doing here that just is going to prolong it and keep jobs here. So, which is nice.
It is nice. I have a friend. It's so weird. He is, him and we met in Lubbock, Texas, and then he actually moved to Hobart. He was coming to help me out, and then he became the director of the museum there in Hobart, and now he's the head of Kansas Strong. So he moved to Kansas, and he's the head of Kansas Strong, which is dealing with jobs in the oil field industry within Kansas. And so it's kind of crazy how that, I think about different people I know, and just how that's, affected their career and all those things. So pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I again, appreciate you being on the show. And, I guess one of the things is just kind of jumping into I guess the elephant in the room, the things that we really want to talk about. And, your daughter committed suicide and a few years ago. And I would, as much as you would like to share, I want to be super sensitive about it. And, I'm not an expert on all that either. And I know you're not an expert besides just living it and being around it. If you don't mind, can you just give us a little background on that and what happened with your daughter?
Sure. Well, Devin was my middle daughter, and I have a son. He's my stepson, but he's been in my life since before he was 2. So, mine in all that respect. And then, I have 3 girls, and Devin is the middle daughter. And, she, definitely the middle child. If you watch those, my daughters and I send those memes, or not memes, but reels back and forth all the time of the oldest child, the middle child, and the youngest child, how their personalities just from birth order. And she was that the goofy, happy, just always entertaining middle child.
Yeah.
But when and I'll just, for the sake of time, I guess, when she was 11, she fell on a bouncy slide at a birthday party. Mm-hmm. And just one of those things, that you don't think a lot about when it happens. And but she just kept complaining about it. And she was in gymnastics and we were very active, and she was in sports, and it just didn't go away. And so I finally took her in, and we have this mentality, I think a lot of people do, of you're okay, I know it hurts, but you're okay, just keep going. And but then finally I did, we went to our local doctor, Dr. Perkins, there in Elk City, and he x-rayed it and didn't find anything, but wanted us to go on to another doctor there in Oklahoma City. So we did, and he did an MRI, and he found a herniated or ruptured disc and in her lower back. And so, I remember his words. He said, "The bad thing is she's 11. The good thing is she's 11. So I don't feel like it needs surgery. I feel like she'll recover, and he gave us some prescriptions and that kind of progressed, not very well in the fact that what they prescribed was basically just muscle relaxers. And for an 11-year-old going to school every day, that just wasn't the solution. So I called them back and said, this isn't going to work. We're going to have to do something different. And so started physical therapy, which did a lot of good. And we went through that entire, and she's I think 6th grade at that time. So she's still young, maybe 5th grade, and still active, but not at full capacity because has this pain. But the physical therapy helped, and thought that was good. And so, I lose track of what the time lapse was, but started into junior high and just started experiencing more pain. And we went back to physical therapy, and it didn't respond as well. And she kept trying to play sports, and I can remember there was just a change in her, and chronic pain, and it just wears you down.
No.
And so, and I have to think about this just for the timeline, but I do remember a ball game, she was a cheerleader, and a certain ball game, her last ball game that she played, she was playing basketball. And I remember just thinking something is wrong. And she's not a star athlete, but she loved being part of a team.
Yeah.
So I could just tell something was wrong. And afterwards, I didn't see her come down to cheer. And so I went down to where the other cheerleaders were, and I found her, and she was sitting on the steps crying. And she said, I can't do this. It hurts too bad. So that's when, with each thing you think you're making an improvement. And then when that stops working, you just try something else, go to something else. And so I went and saw another doctor and diagnosed it. Dr. Perkins was out of town and diagnosed it as sciatic nerve. So again, just painkiller and physical therapy. I'm the one that said, I think we should go back to physical therapy. That seems to help more than anything. So we go to physical therapy again, and they will write you, so many visits, and thought that was helping. And she went back to play softball, and her legs started going numb to the point where she had to be carried off the field a couple of times, where she would turn just right and her legs would go numb and she'd just have to sit down. And that's hard, as a kid. But went through that, battled through that, spent some time in a wheelchair, some weeks in a wheelchair. And again, went back to Dr. Perkins. He would get us into a neurologist. The neurologist, I know the first one we went to was in Oklahoma City at Children's, and ran all kinds of tests. And he said, I can't find. He said she obviously, the numbness of her legs, that's obviously real. They put needles in the bottom of her foot and did the nerve testing. And she never flinched. So there was something obviously physically wrong, but they couldn't find it. So he referred us to another neurologist at Baptist. And by this time, I think she's in junior high by this time. And a lot of family transitions, and that's something that, and I wrote this down because there were some important things I did not want to forget as I go through this. And that was just to relate it to ConocoPhillips. They have this theory, or I guess you'd call it a theory, the Swiss cheese effect, where if enough things line up, we can go through hard things or they use it for safety examples. But if enough things line up, if enough, then you have a hole in your processes, and it's really hard to overcome that. So things are building. Her dad and I divorced during that time, and we moved to our home there in Elk City. And she was good. My kids went to counseling. And that happens, and we were getting through it. And so back to the timeline, we go see a neurologist there at OU. And this is where I think it really, it took a bad turn in that neurologist, it was a woman. She assessed her maybe for 20 or 30 minutes, and they're in the room, and then just told her, honey, I'm sorry, but this is in your head. And that was hard.
No.
It's hard for me to hear, and devastating to her. So I said, okay, if that's what you're going to tell us, refer us to a counselor. I'm willing to do whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to just stop and say, well, it's in your head, you'll get over it. And so we go to counseling, or she refers someone there in Oklahoma City. And we, another downfall of Western Oklahoma, as great as it is to live there, services for mental health are pretty limited.
Mm-hmm.
So we drive to Oklahoma City, which for me is not a big deal. I didn't care. At that point, as a parent, you'll do whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And we see a counselor for, they prescribe you so many months. And it's getting close to the end, and the counselors, and I'm willing to just keep going. And the counselor says, she's pretty well adjusted. I've met with her several times. I really don't think that there's a need for you to keep coming. And I said, well, that's great, but, it's still not a solution. But we talked on the way home, and I just said, whatever it is, we'll figure it out. We won't stop. We'll keep going. So I don't know, again, months passed, and she has these times when her legs are numb, or she's in so much pain, and then started going to her neck, pain in her neck, and a visit to the emergency room. I remember that. And they just basically started giving her Benadryl, just to really, so that she could sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, after that, sorry, you flash back to those moments.
Oh gosh, no, you're good.
I think after that, I had a neighbor that had seen a specialist in Tulsa, and same thing. He told me, he said, I wanted to go back to work, but they told me that I couldn't go back to work. And he said, I couldn't actually work. And I was going through all this. He said, I was really down. And I finally saw this doctor in Tulsa, and he found the vertebrae in my neck that was causing the issue. And he'd had surgery, and he was back at work. Yeah. And we had this conversation. He was my neighbor at the time, and we were just, I've been a runner for a long time. And so we would meet, and one day in the road, we just stopped, and he said, I know your daughter's having issues. His daughter was on the same softball team. He said, you should go see this doctor. And it was in Tulsa. And I said, okay, just give me his name. And so I got an appointment there. This doctor was willing to see us. And again, the whole, seeing a new doctor, taking all the history down, all the process. We went there. I think we saw him 2 or 3 times. He did tests on like a whole battery of tests. I did appreciate that he was very thorough in not just looking at her or talking to her or looking at an x-ray and saying, sorry, nothing's wrong with you. So he ordered some blood tests, and for things like, what is the disease that you get from ticks? Rocky Mountain spotted fever, things like that are obscure things. And she had some levels that weren't all just normal, but when he brought us in and he looked at those, he said, I really don't think that it's an elevated level enough to go down that road.
Right.
And so he at the time she had braces and she was about to get them off. And he said, I really can't do a thorough x-ray of her neck until she gets those braces off. So we get her braces off, we go back, he does the x-ray, and you have this hope of that they'll find something. And I remember that day after that x-ray and him just saying, I'm sorry, I don't. And he said, I can tell, I can see her old injury. It doesn't look like it would cause these symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to tell you. I can't help you anymore. And so we left. And again, it was a hard day. Yeah. And came home. And by that time, she had quit playing sports. And sports in a small school is a big deal. It's your social group. So that making that decision that I'm not going to play sports anymore, I don't want to, I just can't, was really hard. And but I remember saying, this is just our focus here. This is not the big picture, and here's the things that are good about not playing sports is that you can focus on your grades. You can focus on, something else. This isn't your whole life. Just because one thing's been taken away does not mean your entire life's been taken away. But it's hard, I think she was probably 14 at that time, to see that, to have that big picture, because to them right now is their entire world.
Yes.
And it can be for all of us, but especially that age. Yeah. And that was, I taught that age group and have a real appreciation for that, because one day they come to you and they're these little kids that just love you. And the next day they're these wannabe adults that are just, in turmoil, constant turmoil. And so it was hard, but really seemed to get through that and start to see friend groups differently, have to deal with a lot of things that you don't want your kid to have to deal with. That is just it's part of growing up. But when you're going through other things, it's even harder, but again, she bounced back, and I operated with my good friend. We operated all the concession there for Merritt, and she started working in there and really helped me, and just found her groove, and friend groups, and just she would have days that were bad, and she'd have to stay home, miss a lot of school, and I'd always stay, because I had taught there, stay in contact, and she never got behind as far as schoolwork or anything like that. So, but started seeing a chiropractor and massages, and just was trying to treat it that way, basically just the symptoms. But the week of, she had a bad, we were in the big tournament out at Merritt, and she'd had a really bad evening and night. And the next morning she said, I can't go to school. I said, oh, okay, I'm going to get you to see Dr. Perkins. Because I think she did have a fever, just more than just the normal pain. And so she went to see Dr. Perkins, and she's 16 by now, and she's driving herself and her sister to school. And so I go to work, and after school, she had a doctor's appointment, and, she had a slight infection. So they prescribed her some medication. And I told her, because, you want them to be an active part of their own recovery of anything, and also just gaining that independence. And so I said, I need you to talk to Dr. Perkins and tell him what you need. Like, whatever you need, we'll do. But you talk to him. And sometimes, giving them that outlet as a kid to talk to someone besides their parent is good. And I was hoping that would come of it. And she did. And he had scheduled her an appointment with a very well-known chief of neurology in Oklahoma City. And so, he was still searching and hopeful for her. And so, and knowing that we just don't give up on this. This isn't, you have to accommodate and adjust, but you don't just say, well, this is just, there's no hope. Mm-hmm. So I remember the night before, and I'm sure you've seen it, the just look of hopelessness on her face. And she told me I had taken her sister to piano lessons, and she texted me and said, when you come home, don't come in my room. I just want to be by myself. And I immediately, I'm a pretty aggressive parent, I guess. As a single mom, I just no, I'm not. No, I called her and I said, no, I haven't seen you all day. I am going to be in your room. I'm picking your sister up and we're going to eat dinner. And, I know you don't feel well, and so I got home and I even told her sister, I said, I've got to go to the grocery store and get a few things. You go in there and you sit with her and don't leave her. Just sit with her. And she did. And I got back from the grocery store, cooked dinner. And you could just see the more we talk and interact, she just comes out of it, And so the next day was pretty good. And they finished the evening, I don't know, probably cleaning their room. Mm-hmm. And the next day she didn't go to school, but she was still pretty good. And a good friend had come over. I'd gone to work, and a good friend of hers, her best friend at the time, had come over. Her boyfriend had come over. Her best friend and I left at the same time. I went to school to work at the concession, and she was good when I left, but I called her and she was upset. She called me and she was upset. And this is my youngest daughter's basketball games that we're at. And then I'm in concession because we operated the concessions. And without the entire story of all the conversations, I sat down and I was watching my youngest daughter play when I got a text that said, I'm sorry for what I'm about to do. And it was a long text, but I read those words and I left. And I called. It's strange how your brain will work, because I've never been able to find my keys or my purse the first time ever leaving that place. And I knew right where they were. I got it. I got in my car. I called, actually, my neighbor, Jason, mom, and I called him. And I can't even remember the words I used, but I could tell he did not hesitate for 1 second. And I just said, something's wrong with Devin. I need you to go to my house. And then I didn't hear him for a while. And I found out later it was because he immediately ran to my house. And we're still on the phone. And anyway, he says, her car's in the drive, but I can't find her. He'd been in the house, and then she'd sent the text to all of her sisters and brother and my parents. And my son, the minute he sees it, he is on the phone, and I said, I don't know what's happening, Dylan, but just get the fire department to our house. Because he was a fireman at the time. He worked for Elk City. Yeah. And but when I got there, Jason's wife stopped me at the door, and I knew. And I don't really know where to go after that. It was, you've experienced it a little bit. It was just like beyond belief.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, wow. I'm curious to just maybe pivot a little bit. I'm curious how you got through it, and I know that you go through, like, they talk about like stages of grief, and I know, like, for me, and way different, meaning that I didn't lose a child. But for me, like I remember like extreme anger. That's one of the emotions that I really remember, and I went through different, but there's one particular period of time where I was just like having extreme anger. And I'm just curious how, like some ways that you got through it, some things that you felt like you did, and just the process that you had to basically grieve through this.
Well, and I know that was for some reason, I have to tell it in that order to get to, even where, like, just what you're saying, just, okay, that was like the end of a life for me. That was the end, not of life, but the end of a life. And so to me, it was it's been another life. And I think that was
ended, and then you had to begin again, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, well, for one, I mean, I have other children, and I remember sitting there that night, and Heather, Jason's wife, literally held me together.
Yeah.
For a little bit, and then then people start coming, and you just have like it's a blur. And but I remember thinking, somebody has to get Bailey, my youngest. And it wasn't a decision like I've got to keep going. Not at that point, not at all. But it's just like there's still something in front of me, kind of thing. Like I don't want to do this. I do not want to do this, but there was something in front of me. And like you said, the stages. So you get through those first few days where you're just surrounded with people, and things come of that you never expect, stories and people that open up to you that sometimes it's good and sometimes it's just too much. But anyway, you get through that initial week or so and funeral, and then you start just navigating when you're doing some of the same things, but you are not there as far as like, again, it's a new world, a new life that you're in. But, for me, I'm a reader, and I spent a lot of time alone with my work in my job. And I was already a fan of Brene Brown. I read some of her work already. She's a clinical social worker, actually, not psychologist, but social worker. She's done a lot of work in psychology, and I had read a couple of her books. Well, I just started consuming them and just listening. And I think it is that when you have no words to put to your own feelings, like you feel like you're in a vacuum, and you just know, oh yeah, I have to get up. I have to get, if you still have children, for me, it was daily. I still have to do this for her. I would never want her to not have me present, And so I have to do that. And so that keeps you going physically, but just when you're alone, like in a vacuum, I had to hear other people's words to sort through it, I think, and to even name some of the things that you're feeling, because it's not just about, for me, and I think this is the case with all death, especially suicide, it is you retrace and replay out every single thing you would have done differently.
Yes.
And there's a lot to be learned in that, I think. I know I have learned a lot. And I remember saying that to our counselor, and which is another thing I want to come back to. But I remember telling her, and this was probably my consuming thought in the acute grief, the initial weeks and months, was not only was I her mother, but I'm a teacher. Mm-hmm. I'm supposed to see these things. I'm supposed to be able to recognize. I know how to spot issues. Like I had that training. I felt confident in that I was someone that looked for those things. And even though I saw them, I think when it's someone so close to you, well, I don't think you can know 100%, but I think it's something that I won't ever kid myself about again. Like when you have something, I think, happen to you that it did not really register on our radar. It changed, that changes. But one thing that I would say that I think I would preach, if I preached anything, would be counseling for everyone. But working for ConocoPhillips, something that I was very impressed with was we have an employee assistance program. And so, which is ironic how it leads to where I'm at right now. But so I had a man named David Nix, and he contacted me and he said, Christy, ConocoPhillips will pay for 10 free sessions of counseling for you and your family. I want you to go. I will help you find somewhere. I want you to go. And I knew that. I mean, again, going back to my background, I knew that was needed. Throughout my life, I've had counseling, and, I know the benefits and I know the importance. But in that moment, someone saying to me, you need this, and I'm going to help you find it, kind of help. Yeah. And so they did. And we went, my youngest and Devin's boyfriend and her sister went a few times, and her brother once, I think. So it wasn't forced and it wasn't for everyone, but it helped me a lot because I remember these distinct things I would say that I mean, it was about all that I could find words for. I looked at her one time and I said, this is forever. Like, how am I going to function for a year? Because she said something like a year from now. I said, a year from now, I can't even imagine a year from now. Like, it's not, everything's in a vacuum. But anyway, that like you said, that stage of acute grief, but this assistance program, so in the counseling, it didn't make things go away, but it gave us a window, I think, to like, okay, this is okay for an hour. Like, because everything is so, you feel like you're on another planet. For an hour, I know that this is why I'm here. Like this, you kind of face what your issue for the moment. And then you can, it makes it easier to do those things you just push through in a daily routine. I think if you have that 1 hour a week or every other week, I don't even remember what it was, but to just kind of, they describe it. And I actually am working in that EAP as part of my job here at Conoco in Midland, but, and I've read so many articles and books and consume that, but the best example or the best illustration was a balloon that is blown up to the point that it's going to pop. And if you can just let a little bit of air out, it just gives you a little bit of space. And then it makes it easier the next time. You know that you're not going to walk out of there. And this goes for the people that have been through whatever, if it's suicide, if it's loss of any kind, or just struggling, just the person themselves struggling. I think if they have that opportunity, whether it be licensed counseling, whether it be a person they can confide in, whether, whatever, if they have that thing that just lets a little bit of that pressure, a little bit of that air out over time, it really is beneficial. You don't notice it every single time, but when you look back, I mean, because sometimes I left there thinking, I can't even drive home. I'm too tired. I mean, just exhausted.
Counseling it can be exhausting.
Yeah, but I think
emotionally draining. You spend an hour and it feels like you've been there an entire day. It's like, go take a nap. You got
your ass kicked, to just be honest.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Well, so anyway, I think about also, like, I wanted to ask you, like, if I love how you said that, and it's so true about how you end up playing like the scenarios over and over in your head, and should it, you could do forever of shoulda, coulda, all those things. And, and what I've learned through my process is like, you shoulda, coulda, would have done anything and it wouldn't have changed anything. I really believe that. And for me, and, I tell the story, like one of my cousins, he never called me, and he called me that night. And, it's kind of, they talk about that, like, kind of like your daughter sending out the text. It's like he called, and that was a rare thing. And I was too busy, and I said, "Hey, I'll call you back." And, of course, I played that over my head, a ton of times. But I'm curious, like, and I mentioned this to you when you and I talked, it's like, I see this a lot where you have, like a parent struggling with their kid and going through, maybe it is the same thing like chronic pain, or maybe it's, you just see depression or, whatever. And maybe they've even, like verbalized wanting to die. And, I struggle in what to tell or what advice to give those parents, because, it's a tough situation. And, I think the biggest thing, like even we talked about in the nonprofit, is that we're not a crisis center. It's like there's definitely a point of crisis where you need to, get professional help now, whether it be go to the emergency room, whether, there is that point. But I'm really talking about kind of before it gets to that crisis. It's like, and I'm curious, any advice that you would have for a parent that's maybe struggling with a kid that's dealing with any of those issues, and what advice would you give them? If, like, let's say their kid said, "Hey, I'm thinking of, like verbalizes wanting to die," or, even maybe like what your daughter dealt with the chronic pain, what advice would you give to them?
Never like to think of myself ever giving advice.
Yeah.
I can tell you my experience, but I don't want to give anyone advice. I would say that in the times when and it's been young people have reached out to me, don't be afraid to say what you wrote. I mean, don't, like, I think profound grief just wipes away all the BS that you want to deal with. And I have said the words, I need you to stay alive. I just need you to stay alive. You do not want to fix temporary problems with a permanent solution. That's not, I just need you to stay alive. Yeah. But the thing about that is, and like I said, I've read so much, and I'm a big, science, I feel like there is a true science, like behavioral, cognitive behavioral thinking. Like I think you have to, well, I heard a quote, I'm in the middle of another book right now, and it's actually called Hope Rising, and Devin's middle name was Hope. And so I've kind of clung to that anyway, but I've really been made aware of that there is a real way to quantify that and to make it a teachable skill. But the quote I heard was, it's easier to raise a resilient child than to fix a broken man. And so I think it's important, and I know you're asking specific, just one-on-one advice, but I think it's important that we all realize how we have to teach kids to think about their thinking and give them real grown-up talk about how to analyze their own, or how to think about their thinking, how to think through crisis, how to zoom out is a good way to put it, and see the bigger picture, and that you need to be a part of it. And just empowerment, I think, in that, I think if you get to that point of reaching out that strongly by saying, that you're thinking, or a kid saying, is that letting them know everything you need to fix you I'm going to help you, but you have it in you. You have it. Teaching them, constantly reminding them, which I felt like I did, but you still are just so much more aware when you look backwards in that probably more, I don't know, probably empowering her more and just not leaving her. Once, and this is kind of chasing a rabbit here because I don't have real solutions, but I do try to read some and just gather things that are helpful. Nothing fixes every problem.
Right.
Nothing does. But one, I think that I would give a parent, well, I have given this to parents, is that you need some support too. You need someone that isn't telling you what to do, but is just staying with you while you do whatever you need to do, kind of thing. You need that person
beside you, kind of.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be, there's no specific person, just somebody that isn't judgmental or trying to fix anything. And that's, I think, a thing with the empowering the kid is that, or the other adult or the person is that, I cannot fix you. I cannot, I can't, but I won't leave you, And
I think that's a great point. I really do. I like as I'm listening to you talk about that, you're right. There's this idea that I think from people who maybe haven't been in these situations that, and of course we ask ourselves, what could we have done and we may not use these words, but what could we have done to save them, but we cannot save people. That's way above, as work would say, way above our pay grade. It's just, we don't have the ability, or we're not that, and I think you're exactly right. It's like, it's not really about saving people. It's really more about how can we, like, I love the word you used, which was empower. It's like, how can we walk beside these people and really help them come to the conclusion, about their own life and about their own situation. I think you're exactly right. I think that, that's so true. You mentioned Heather Mong and you mentioned Jason, and I think, specifically, I'm curious, kind of back when we're talking about, the grieving process, is there a couple of things that people did that worked and maybe it's exactly what we're talking about, just somebody that kind of walked beside you. I guess, like, for me, I saw with my aunt and I saw with myself, there's some things that people absolutely said that did not work, that were borderline mean, rude. I had just some horrible comments sent to me, and like one of the big ones, like, I'm always blown away, and people, like, it's almost unbelievable that somebody did this, but they did do it, where they said to myself and my aunt that because my cousin had committed suicide, he wasn't going to heaven, and, just unbelievably mean. And I know that's not normal, but I'm curious, what did anybody do or say that you felt like helped during that grieving process?
There were so many that helped in different ways. Like, as far as helped me, supported me, I had a lot of friends. But I think I knew, just because I don't know if it's my personality type, or I knew I'd have to do it by myself. I would have to do it myself. I would have to, not because people aren't willing to be there, but because I'm responsible for me. And if I'm going to empower someone else, I have to empower myself first, in that I'm going to have to find things. I can't depend on someone coming to me, and not that they didn't, because they did. And honestly, it was just time. If you would spend time with me, especially during those early days, if you would spend time with me and not be shocked by some of the things that came out of my mouth, and not try to give advice, not try to tell me anything. If you would just hear me, that was, and not like, I recognize a lot of looks. I think you do. Like some people can walk beside, or some people can really sit with you in your sadness.
Mm-hmm.
And some people just can't. And I think letting the people that can't, it's not always because they're bad friends. It's because they can't. And then just a real appreciation for people that can. And then as you've been through things, realize that you don't really have to do much, but if you can be with someone in the most terrible place of their life, then that's going to help. And you don't need words past that, really. Just can you be there? Mm-hmm. And not all the time. No one's there all the time. But yeah, I think it's amazing how little we actually have to do to bring the most comfort.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I really do. I do. The 2 or 3 things that I've taken out of this, and actually you really brought it to mind. It's like, because of course, like with us dealing with this not-for-profit, I'm thinking, okay, what can we do? And, it's just trying to find different creative. It's like, and one of the things you said when you talked about ConocoPhillips, I love that they stepped up and offered, the counseling. And I think that's a great idea. I think it's super powerful. It's like, we want to help. And this is, if you think about a company as the size of ConocoPhillips, it's like, it's tough. It's tough to know same thing, where to help and how to help. And, and I think that's a great specific area that would really make a difference. It's like, I'll, pay for some counseling for you and your other kids and, those kind of things. That seemed to be pretty powerful.
Well, and as sad as it is, usually most anything goes back to the dollar. And so, I'm lucky to work for a company that has the capital, but then also sees the need to reinvest the capital in their people. Mm-hmm. And I think, and this is just a personal thing I've noticed. Well, I remember that night, my son calling his high school buddy that happened to work on the fire department. And he was the first one there. I didn't remember it that night. Dylan we've had to go back and talk about it. And, he's told me, but I mean, just the appreciation for what people like that do, that was hard for him. He had to see his good friend, my son, going through that. It's just a whirlwind of mental stress besides just the incident itself. And I think that is lacking in our public service teachers and firemen, people that serve the most needy, serve in the hardest situations. Dylan's now a flight paramedic. So he sees horrific things all the time. And, that doesn't hit his job and he can do it well. But I know that there are certain things that have affected him, like that triggering thing, and it's not the same for everybody. And why aren't we making sure that those kinds of people or those jobs, military again, honestly, anyone, like it really, I think it needs a greater emphasis of, it doesn't take a lot. It just takes the space to let a person talk to you and not think that they're going to be judged, that they're going to be given advice, or that they're going to be fixed. Just let them talk, a space. And I think that's a huge need for everyone. And, a good place to start, I would think, would be just like my company does it for their employees. I would think it would be, just our city employees, our people that deal with really hard things, or and that all, that is so abstract. How do you really help? And I think we try, there's the be kind, which is great. That is true. You can start with that, but we're not always going to be kind. No one is going to be kind 100% of the time, no matter how good a person they are. Right. So that's a great place, but some real tools, some real skills, and just the normalizing of everybody needs to talk to somebody at some point in their life. Like, we are human, no matter how strong your faith is. If you're, if that's your pathway, if that's your strength is in your faith, or no matter, how good just all kinds of things. We're all human, and it is perfectly normal to struggle at some point. And no one's ever going to escape it completely, And so the more we do it, the more normalized it becomes. And I think then you just kind of chip away at it that way. I don't know all those things to put in wheels in motion to get those types of changes, but it's something I'm interested in.
Yeah, I think it's great, and I think part of we're talking about stigma, removing the stigma of like suicide and awareness and all, but I think that it's like, if you even break it down like simpler, it's kind of like what you're talking about. It's like of getting help, of talking to someone. I think about, there's a lot of people that are very anti like doing counseling, and I think that those are areas that it can really make a difference, and just talking to somebody, because that having somebody to listen and being able to verbalize and just be there and those kind of things. So
well, and Devin left me a video that I watched later, and it's still there. I have it. But something that stands out to me is, we were very close. All my kids, we are close. They're close with each other. And when I say close, I don't mean we never argue. I just mean that we make contact a lot.
Yeah.
But she said, "Mom, I wish I would have talked to you more."
Wow. That's pretty powerful. Truly.
Yeah.
Can't imagine. I think that there's something there that can really help, when you think about what she left, kind of like what she would want, I guess. I don't know. I think about that. It's like, that's a good message to think about. I wish we'd talk more, wish we would talk. She would.
I think the biggest part of me being able, because there was times when I could not think past, like I would get so trapped in, I don't like labels, but it is post-traumatic syndrome, like PTSD, where I could not, something would trigger a memory. For the longest time, I struggled so hard to sit in that basketball gym.
Oh, yeah.
Because I would replay everything over and over. And once I realized, hey, you have to, it's kind of like at first you have to do it. You just don't know how to break out of it. And then it's like, wait, I don't have to do this. I don't have to be here. I don't have to sit in the same seat. I don't have to, again, thinking about my own thinking, but, you move through that in the stages, like you said, where you have to realize, hey, this is where I'm at. I get caught. But now I can move out of that. And for me, that was the most healing. And it wasn't a day. It didn't happen in a day. Was that one, I can be sad forever, and I will be, but I can still do happy things with people, and also just that I cannot go back as much. And I think this all the time, and I journal a lot, and actually to Devin, but I say I would take my worst day. I would take my very worst day before that day, but I can't. It is impossible. So when I really made that mental shift of, I cannot go back, even though, I would want to, and I would do anything too, but it's impossible. I have to go, move on, but I have to move forward.
Well, I think when you were talking about, like, basically this life ended and this life began, like, even when you're talking about like where to sit at the gym or even going to the gym, maybe in this new life, you don't have to sit in that same seat. You don't have to go to the gym necessarily. And I think that is pretty, like, I can really relate to that, because it's like we have a tendency because of habit to go and do those same things, and to hear you say, it's like, man, we don't, because this is a new life. We don't have to sit in that same seat. We don't have, you know what I mean? And I think that's pretty powerful. And I think you're right. And part of like your own healing, or like, empowering yourself, is like, I have to maybe just maybe not talk to some certain person, because it just goes down this road of memories or whatever, whatever that is. And it's like realizing, giving yourself the space to say, I can do it differently. I want to, I need to, whatever it may be. I think that's pretty powerful too, that people, it's so simple, but yet I think it's pretty profound, that I haven't heard it exactly like that.
And I think if I would have, you can't know until you know. But if we could teach those skills younger in life or earlier in life, those are true resilience skills, being skills to be resilient. Because it may not be suicide or death. It may be something that could really be, if you have that sense of self early, we approach it, like I was saying before, to be kind and know everyone's going through something. And that is absolutely true. But if we approach it from, I need to build these skills in kids, or I need to build these skills in myself. And then it just continues. And every day is not like that. There's bad days. There's days when I just don't care. I don't want to try. I don't care. But again, that zoom out, it's just today. Tomorrow, it's going to be different.
Yeah, that's so true. I think I think it's a great point. I think building resilience is a big deal. I do. And in ourselves, I think that, like, I look at, like, that may not be suicide, like you're saying, but maybe they turn to, drugs or alcohol. It's like, those are same concepts. It's like building those resilience, and like, all kinds of different ways that you start to realize that empower yourself, or you start to build that, I can get through this. I can do this, and I can do it in a way that, is better and healthier or different, so.
And it's important to see that you need to do that for yourself too. Like one of my favorite Brene Brown quotes is, you can't give what you don't have. And so, know that you have to do it for yourself too.
I read one of her books, and I was and it was very impactful, but I was trying to think of which one it was. But she's a great author. So that was a good one. Well, Christy, I appreciate it very much. You taking the time, and I know it was hard, and I know it's hard to talk about things like this, and but I sure appreciate it, and I appreciate you willing to help and just be a part of it and be vulnerable and all those things. And you don't know me that well, so that makes it extra hard. But I really appreciate it, and if there's, I don't know that I'm going to throw it out there kind of towards the end of this. If somebody, let's say you have maybe a woman that's a mother who's struggling with some of these issues that we talked about, is there like an email or something, if they wanted to reach out to you, that I want to do it in a respectful and or a right way? How would you, if somebody listens to this and they would really like to reach out to you and just talk or whatever, what's the best way for them to do that?
It would probably be text, because unless it's my work email, it may be a couple of days before I actually pay that close attention. But I can tell you what I'm going to say is I want you to know that I support you. But if I am not a professional, my advice is always going to be find a counselor, find professional help. I'm not just passing you off. And in fact, that's our training that we're receiving right now at the EAP program company-wide, is that I am here. I'm a point of contact. I will absolutely listen to you. You can come back to me. I'm not going to leave you. But my advice is going to be first, seek this out. Yeah. Seek out professional counseling.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. And it's almost like when you say it now and when I say it now about seek help, it took me, a little bit to understand that it's like the role of our organization cannot be, we're not the experts. We do not know everything. And so I think that's vital to, what we're doing in our success, that we point them in the right direction. And we don't give that, advice, but, yes, we can be encouragement. Yes, we can be a listening ear and these things, but also it's like, we want you to seek help. And I it's kind of a motto that I've used with work for years. It's like, I'd say, always ask for help, because people have a weird deal about not asking for help, and then, always be willing to help, but on the same points, like ask for help. And that's such a simple concept, but I agree with you 100%. Well, Christy, I appreciate it very much. And I will be in touch, and I hope you have a great day. And thank you again for sharing your story. All right. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Positively Undefeated. If there was something in this show that resonated with you, please share the show with your community. If you want this show delivered each Monday morning to your podcast app of choice, please subscribe or follow. And if you'd like to get a hold of Burl, please do so by going to burlstricker.com/contact.